The sky over Valkyries was the color of burned steel, thick with drifting ash that clung to every surface. Heat bled from the blackened ground in waves, distorting the jagged silhouettes of shattered towers and broken gunships. The air reeked of scorched metal and something worse, organic matter cooked into the soil by the orbital barrage. Commander Ryan Hale moved through the skeletal remains of what had once been a Dominion tactical base, his armor battered and streaked with carbon scoring. His cracked helmet visor let in just enough grit to sting his eyes, but he kept moving. 2 days without sleep had dulled his reflexes, but not his instincts. His rations were gone, his canteen nearly dry, and the only thing keeping him upright was the habit of survival. Each step crunched over shards of fused alloy. The HUD in his visor flickered, struggling to hold a stable readout in the electromagnetic haze. Then, a faint ping heat signature, 60 meters ahead. He stopped, lowering himself behind the skeletal frame of a downed gunship. The signal didn't move much. Could be a dying soldier. Could be a scavenger. Could be a trap. Slowly, he edged forward, rifle raised, boots whispering against the ash. The collapsed transport lay half buried in the scorched dirt, its hull torn open like a gutted animal. Through the shimmer of residual heat, Ryan saw her. A lone figure in the ruin, kneeling on the ground, not hiding, not running. Her head was bowed slightly, shoulders squared as if she refused to cower entirely. Long silver hair hung in tangled clumps, matted with dried blood and soot. The remnants of ceremonial armor clung to her frame-gilded trim, scorched black. Shoulder guards warped by heat, plates cracked and hanging by threads of faceting. She looked like something torn out of a royal portrait and thrown into the fire. Ryan kept his rifle steady as he closed the distance. His breath rasped in his helmet, louder than he liked. At 20 meters, she raised her head. Her eyes were startling bright teal, glinting even through the dust. They fixed on his visor, wide but not defiant. The kind of eyes that had seen the truth of a battlefield and understood what came next. Her voice broke the silence, soft but carrying in the stillness. "Please, don't kill me." It hit harder than it should have. His training said every unknown was a potential threat, especially in Dominion territory. His orders, standing and unwritten, were clear. High-value enemy personnel were to be detained, restrained, and extracted. He scanned her quickly. No visible weapons. No combat rig. But ceremonial armor meant rank, and rank meant danger. His instinct said prisoner. His training said detain. His exhaustion said just walk away. She lifted her chin a fraction more, and the next words slid into the dead air between them, deliberate, without a tremor. "Don't kill me, human. I'll warm your bed." Ryan's grip on the rifle tightened. It could be a ploy, psychological manipulation, desperation tactic, one he'd seen enemy operatives use before. Offer something personal to buy a heartbeat, then strike. But she didn't move. She didn't reach for a weapon. She just stayed there, breathing shallow, eyes locked on his. A bead of sweat slid down the back of his neck. The ash shifted faintly in the wind. One trigger pull would end this, make the choice for him. Instead, he stood there, staring back at her, and in the space of a few seconds that felt like hours, he made the smallest decision that would change everything. He didn't pull the trigger. The bunker loomed out of the dust like a forgotten tomb, its curved bulk half swallowed by debris. What little paint remained on the dented hatch was scorched pale, the Dominion crest barely visible beneath a crust of soot. Ryan kept his rifle in one hand and gestured toward it with the other. "Move. The woman princess or not rose." Slowly, her legs unsteady, the movement revealing a limp she'd hidden while kneeling. Up close, her armor looked worse. Plates buckled from heat, fastening straps fused to scorched fabric. The smell of burned metal clung to her. She didn't speak as she followed him across the slope of rubble, her eyes scanning the horizon with the same wary precision he used. The hatch resisted him at first. Sand and grit had wedged deep into the locking teeth. He shoved, muscles straining, until the mechanism groaned and the seal broke with a hiss of stale air. Inside, the bunker was no sanctuary, just a narrow room with a rusted bench, a cracked heater, and the metallic tang of old machinery. The emergency lights flickered, shadows twitching against the walls. "Sit," Ryan ordered. She obeyed without hesitation, lowering herself onto the bench. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers loosely curled, posture straight, despite the fatigue etched into her features. She didn't look at him, but she wasn't hiding her face either. The teal in her eyes caught the light when she glanced up, briefly cool, assessing, not entirely submissive. Ryan sealed the hatch behind them, then unlatched his helmet. The dry air stung his throat as he set the visor down on a crate. Sweat streaked his temples and matted his short brown hair. He studied her again, now without the visor's tint. She was young, maybe his age, but the faint metallic markings along her jaw caught his attention. They weren't scars. They were deliberate, symmetrical, the kind of thing carved into someone as a declaration of lineage. Cultural, not combat-earned. Her breathing was uneven, shallow from dehydration and whatever injury made her limp. Still, she sat with a quiet steadiness he recognized, someone who'd been taught to hold their ground even when their body wanted to fold. "Name," he said. Her gaze met his without flinching. "Saraxa." A pause. "Daughter of Sovereign Kelleran of House Serevith." Ryan's jaw tightened. He'd heard the name. Command chatter claimed she'd been killed in the orbital strike that had gutted this moon. If she was alive, she was a prize, a bargaining chip worth more than half the Dominion's fleet. And now she was in his bunker, unarmed, in arm's reach. "What were you doing here?" "I was attending a war summit," she said, her tone clipped. "I never made it to the shuttle." His rifle stayed angled low, ready. "You were left behind." Her lips twitched, too bitter for a smile. Perhaps by mistake, perhaps not. The heater in the corner sputtered and caught, throwing a weak glow across the room. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Ryan could feel the weight of her earlier words, lingering in the air like smoke. "About what you said outside," he began. She didn't look away. "I meant it." He exhaled slowly, tasting ash on his tongue. Whether it was a trap or desperation, he still couldn't tell. But she was here, breathing, and he'd chosen to keep it that way. For now, the wind outside had died, leaving the bunker steeped in an almost oppressive quiet. Ryan kept his rifle resting across his lap as he crouched near the hatch, listening. The dull hum of the cracked heater was the only sound, its warmth barely pushing back the chill creeping through the walls. A faint chirp from his wrist scanner pulled his eyes down. Another heat signature faint, erratic, was moving southwest. Could have been a malfunction, could have been a drone. But the profile was organic. And a lone dot, he looked over at Saraxa. She sat exactly where he'd left her, still as stone, her gaze fixed on the floor. "Stay here," he said. Her head lifted sharply. "No, you're injured. You'll slow me down. If you die out there, I die in here. Let me help." He studied her for a long moment. She was pale, clearly running on willpower alone, but there was a conviction in her voice he didn't expect. Finally, he tossed her a small sidearm, non-lethal, just 2 charges. "Use it only if you have to." She didn't thank him, just slid the weapon into her grip and rose without another word. They exited through the collapsed service shaft at the back of the bunker, climbing over twisted steel beams and jagged rebar. The air outside was clearer now, the earlier haze stripped away by high-altitude winds. Shadows stretched long over the scorched ridges. skeletal wrecks of gunships casting jagged silhouettes across the barren expanse. Ryan took point, scanning the horizon, his armor's servos whispering with each careful step. Saraxa moved behind him, favoring her left leg but keeping pace. Within minutes, the scanner narrowed their quarry to just 50 meters ahead, near the smoldering husk of a Federation recon craft. Smoke hissed from a bent turbine, curling skyward in pale ribbons. Ryan's boots crunched softly over the grit as he approached, rifle raised. A cough broke the silence. He edged forward and found a man sprawled behind a fragment of hull plating, his Federation armor shredded, a deep gash across his abdomen. Blood soaked the torn fabric beneath. His helmet was gone, his face pale and clammy. Ryan's breath caught. "Vance?" The soldier's eyes fluttered open. "Hail!" His voice was ragged, almost drowned by the distant pop of cooling metal. Ryan crouched beside him. "Corporal Juno Vance, I thought you were dead." "Almost," Vance managed, a weak chuckle escaping before pain doubled him over. Ryan began assessing the wound. It was bad too deep for field dressing alone. He injected a stabilizer, watching the color creep faintly back into Vance's face. Footsteps shifted behind him. Saraxa stepped closer. The moment Vance saw her, his gaze hardened. "What the hell is that doing with you?" "She's not a threat," Ryan said evenly. "She's Dominion, yes, but unarmed. And right now, she's not fighting." "She's bait," Vance growled. Ryan ignored him, keeping pressure on the wound until the stabilizer took hold. Then he glanced at Saraxa. "Help me move him." She knelt without hesitation, her movements efficient despite the limp. Together, they lifted Vance's weight, dragging him toward the cover of a jagged ridge. When they stopped, Ryan caught the faint shimmer of heat rising from the ground in the distance. It wasn't from the sun. He knew the feeling, the quiet before trouble found you. "They'll be back," Saraxa said quietly, her teal eyes scanning the horizon. "I know." They both turned toward the blackened skyline. Neither spoke further. The silence between them had changed, no longer hostility, not yet camaraderie, but something closer to an unspoken pact. For now, survival was the only language they shared. They hauled Vance back toward the bunker in slow, grueling increments, each step a negotiation between speed and the corporal's fading strength. Ryan had jury-rigged a sled from the wreckage, a warped panel lashed to scavenged wiring, but even with the stabilizer in Vance's system, the man's weight was dead and awkward. Saraxa took her share without complaint, her breath sharp and steady, sweat streaking the ash on her face. By the time they reached the hatch, the light was sliding toward the violet hue of Valkyrus's second sunset. Ryan sealed the door behind them and listened for the reassuring click of the manual lock before setting Vance down against the far wall. The corporal slumped immediately, eyes half shut, his armor clinking faintly as he shifted. Ryan crossed the narrow room, found a dented canteen in his pack, and pressed it into Saraxa's hands. "Drink." She took slow, measured sips, careful not to spill a drop. Her fingers trembled as she lowered it. He crouched in front of her. "You don't have to offer yourself to survive," he said, voice low but firm. Her gaze met his without flinching. "I wasn't sure what else would matter to a human soldier." Ryan didn't answer right away. He'd heard similar words before, from civilians trying to survive occupation zones, from prisoners on both sides. But this was different. She wasn't cowering, wasn't spinning a lie she thought he wanted. She was stating a fact, one she'd likely learned the hard way. "You thought I was that kind of soldier?" "No," she said simply, "but I couldn't afford to be wrong." The heater sputtered, sending a pulse of weak warmth through the stale air. Ryan leaned back on his heels, watching her as she shifted her leg, a faint wince crossing her face. "Let me see it," he said. Her hesitation was brief, Then she pulled the ragged fabric up over her thigh. The skin beneath was mottled purple and gray from deep bruising, a shallow burn snaking down her calf. A melted field wrap clung to the wound, fused at the edges. "You should have passed out from the pain," Ryan said, reaching for the Megdit. "I almost did," she admitted. He worked quickly, cutting the wrap free, flushing the burn with the last of the sterile gel. She bit down on the inside of her cheek, eyes fixed on the far wall, her breathing shallow but steady. When he applied the dermal patch, she exhaled slowly, almost in relief. "That'll hold for a while," he said. Straightening Dot, she adjusted her armor plates back into place, her movements deliberate. "You asked why I was here. The truth is, I was supposed to leave with the summit's shuttles. But my people—" She paused, the words caught between defiance and resignation. "Some of them don't see me as pure. My birth was calculated genetic fusion between two royal lines. It gives me the right blood on paper, but not in their eyes. Leaving me here was convenient." Ryan understood that kind of politics all too well. Soldiers abandoned after serving. Their purpose. Leaders deciding who lived or died to protect a narrative. "You're as disposable to them as we are," he said. "Worse," she replied, meeting his gaze. "I'm a failure." He didn't correct her. The truth was too raw to dress in lies. Instead, he reached into his pack, broke a protein ration in half, and handed her the larger piece. They ate in silence, the three of them breathing in the low glow of the heater, the hum of the failing light above them, like a clock ticking down. To whatever came next. Outside, the wind had picked up again, carrying with it the promise that this fragile pause couldn't last. The bioscanner's soft pulse cut through the bunker's stillness, a sound that never failed to tighten Ryan's gut. He checked the display on his forearm. 2 signals, distant but closing. He tapped the screen, adjusting the filter. Human, most likely Federation, though the range made it hard to confirm. Saraxa noticed his glance. "Your people? Maybe." He didn't smile. "Or maybe yours." She pushed herself up from the bench, her limp more pronounced after hours of stillness, but her eyes stayed locked on him. "If it's Dominion, we're both dead. If it's Federation, I need to speak to them before they decide I'm a target." Ryan moved to the hatch and crouched, listening to the faint hiss of wind beyond. "If they're my people, they'll take you in restraints, under guard. You'll vanish into fleet intelligence. Interrogation at best. Dissection at worst. Then don't hand me over," she said plainly, like it was the easiest choice in the galaxy. "It's not that simple." He kept his eyes on the scanner. The blips had shifted, approaching faster now. "It never is." The heater guttered out, leaving the cold to creep back in. Ryan checked Vance's vitals, stable but shallow, then turned to Saraxa. "You still want that relay station plan?" Her brow lifted. "You still trust me to run it?" "I trust that you want to live," he said. They moved out at dusk, the last light fading into the violet of the second sunset. Ryan led, Saraxa close behind, both moving in silence. The ground was treacherous broken panels, jagged ridges, but they crossed it without slowing. The relay station sat like a wounded beast at the base of a cracked ridge, its once proud antenna still angled toward the stars. Most of the outer shell was scorched and half collapsed. No visible patrols, no power signatures. "Looks dead," Ryan murmured. "Not entirely," Saraxa said, already scanning the structure. "If the backup cell survived the EMP, we can piggyback. A burst to your fleet's comnet." Inside, the air was bitter with burned wiring. Dust swirled in their wake as Ryan swept the corners, rifle ready. Saraxa dropped to one knee at a half-buried control panel, prying loose a warped cover to reveal a blinking light, faint but steady. "It's alive," she said, pulling a palm-sized device from her armor. I'll encrypt the signal. Dominion. Format underneath. Earth headers on top. They'll never know it came from here. Before Ryan could answer, movement flickered in his peripheral vision. Figures 3, maybe 4 slipping between the shadows outside. Mismatched armor, low profile. Scavengers. Ryan's rifle came up instantly. We've got company. Saraxa didn't look away from the console. Hold them off. I need 30 seconds. The first plasma bolt hissed through the doorway, scorching the far wall. Ryan fired back, controlled bursts forcing the attackers to duck behind a collapsed support. Another shot tore past, sending molten fragments skittering across the floor. 20. She called, fingers flying over the device. Ryan shifted to the doorway, firing to keep them pinned. 2 broke for the side entrance bad move. He took. 1 down clean, the other hesitating just long enough for a sharp, disciplined burst from behind. Saraxa had her sidearm in one hand, still working the console with the other. Done. She snapped, yanking the device free. Signal sent. We need to go now. They slipped out the rear service hatch, keeping low, circling wide to avoid the scavenger survivors. The night air was colder, the wind sharper against Ryan's exposed jaw dot. By the time they reached the outer ridge, the scanner on his wrist gave the faint ping of a reply. Federation code. ETA. Under an hour. Saraxa's breath came fast, but her eyes were steady. You'll have your extraction. Ryan glanced at her in the half-light. And you'll go willingly? She gave a short nod. I said I would. He didn't answer, but the thought that followed was sharp and unwelcome. And I still don't know what that will cost you. The wind off the ridge carried the faint thrum of approaching engines long before the dropship's lights split the horizon. Ryan stood at the edge of the bunker's collapsed wall, helmet clipped to his belt, rifle resting against his shoulder. The violet sky bled into black above them, stars piercing through the last haze of ash. Saraxa stood a few paces back her, silhouette steady against the dim light. She'd cleaned her face in the brief lull after their return, but the streaks of ash in her silver hair remained, catching the glow from the heater. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the relay station, just waited, watchful, conserving what little energy she had left. The dropship descended in a roar of thrusters, landing lights cutting white spears across the barren landscape. Dust rose in curling sheets, clinging to armor and skin. 2 figures emerged from the Glare Federation recon troopers in matte black, their movement crisp, practiced. The lead soldier stopped a few meters short, visor tilting as he took in the scene. Commander Hale, he called, voice filtered through static. Here, Ryan answered, stepping forward. 2 survivors. 1 Earth, 1 Dominion, both accounted for. The second soldier's gaze locked instantly on Saraxa. His hand drifted toward his sidearm. That's the Dominion Royal, isn't it? Yes, Ryan said without hesitation. She surrendered willingly, unarmed, non-combatant. The lead soldier's visor pivoted toward Saraxa. Intel said you were dead. Intel was wrong, Ryan said flatly. Saraxa's chin lifted, her face unreadable. She didn't speak, didn't move, her eyes shifting only to glance briefly. At Ryan, it was the smallest acknowledgement, but in that moment, it felt like the weight of 1,000 unspoken things. The trooper opened a channel. Command, this is Recon Echo. Visual confirmed on Hale and package. Dominion Royal, leave capture. Sending ID. Ryan's stomach tightened. This was the moment. One order from above, and she would vanish into the machinery of fleet intelligence. He could already picture its sterile rooms, endless interrogations, her name reduced to a line in a classified archive. Her voice broke through his thoughts, quiet but clear. If I go with them without you, I die. With you, I have a chance to speak. He didn't answer, because the choice wasn't really his anymore. The dropship ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, bright interior lights spilling onto the ash. She stepped forward on her own. No restraints, no guards. She passed the troopers without slowing, boarding like she belonged there. At the top of the ramp, she turned back, eyes locking on him. No fear, no plea. Just understanding. 3 weeks later, Earth orbit. The S-Vigilant hung above the blue curve of the planet, the war's hum quieting into the uneasy stillness of a pending ceasefire. Ryan stood in the observation bay, watching sunlight creep across the edge of the world. The door behind him slid open. Footsteps. Then she was beside him, no armor now, just a gray utility jacket and black trousers. Civilian. Or at least the closest she would ever get to it. "You're early," he said without turning. "You knew I'd come." "I hoped." They stood in silence for a beat, the glass before them reflecting two figures who should never have shared the same side of a war. "What happens now?" she asked. "Whatever we want." Her smile was faint, almost dangerous. A reckless answer. "I? No." For a moment, it felt like the war had been left somewhere down there, far below the curve of the earth. But in her eyes, he saw the truth. She'd been granted asylum, but her first assignment was already set. To return to Dominion space as a liaison, an envoy, walking into the very court that had abandoned her. "You'll see me again," she said softly. "If I live long enough." He didn't trust his voice, so he only nodded. They watched the sunrise together in silence, both knowing that the next time they met could be on a very different battlefield.